I would like to emphasize immediately that this coup was not initiated by the armed forces merely to satisfy our selfish ends. As I said in my earlier broadcasts, the takeover was occasioned principally by the hypocrisy of the Bouzia regime, coupled with the inefficient management by that regime of our economy.
Ignatius Kutu Acheampong once seemed carved out of the same granite as power itself. For years, his presence dominated Ghana's political and military landscape, with the quiet certainty of a man who believed history had chosen him. He did not rise through fiery speeches or popular rallies. He rose through boots on parade grounds, orders issued in clipped tones, and loyalty forged within the barracks. To some, he was the embodiment of discipline and national pride. To others, he was a symbol of excess, authoritarian rule, and broken promises. Yet no matter where one stood, few imagined that the man who once commanded the state would end his life before a firing squad, stripped of everything that had once defined him. Acheampong's journey began far from the corridors of power. Born in a modest Ghanaian town, his early life was shaped by routine, structure, and ambition. The military offered him more than a career. It offered identity, purpose, and a ladder that promised ascension for those willing to submit to its harsh discipline. He embraced it fully. Over the years, he earned a reputation as a capable officer, pragmatic rather than ideological, decisive rather than verbose. He was not known for grand political philosophy, but he understood power, how it moved, how it was seized, and how it was maintained. By the early 1970s, Ghana was restless. Economic hardship gnawed at daily life. Inflation surged, shortages worsened, and confidence in civilian leadership eroded. The military watched closely, as it often had in post-independence Ghana, convinced that politicians had once again failed the nation. When Acheampong led the coup that overthrew Prime Minister Kofi Busia in 1972, it was presented as a rescue mission. Tanks rolled through Accra not as conquerors, but as self-proclaimed saviors. Many Ghanaians, weary of economic pain, welcomed the change with cautious hope. Acheampong assumed leadership with a blend of populism and military authority. He spoke of self-reliance, African pride, and economic independence. His policies emphasized local production and a break from foreign dependency. The famous Operation Feed Yourself campaign urged citizens to farm, to grow food, to believe once more in Ghana's capacity to sustain itself. For a time, optimism returned. Markets buzzed with activity, farms expanded, and Acheampong's image as a nationalist leader grew. He appeared approachable, often smiling, sometimes informal, very different from the distant rulers many had known. But power has a way of demanding more from those who hold it. As the years passed, cracks began to show. The economy faltered again, this time under the weight of mismanagement, corruption, and global pressures. Acheampong's inner circle grew wealthier, while ordinary Ghanaians struggled. Stories spread of lavish lifestyles, of officers enriching themselves, of a leadership increasingly disconnected from the people it claimed to serve. The hope that once surrounded the regime began to sour into resentment. Acheampong tried to consolidate his rule, introducing the idea of a union government, a hybrid system that would blur the lines between civilian and military authority. To him, it was stability. To critics, it was a calculated attempt to remain in power indefinitely. Opposition hardened, students protested, workers grumbled, even within the military, loyalty frayed. The institution that had elevated him now whispered about his failures. In 1978, Acheampong was forced out by his own colleagues in a palace coup. It was a quiet fall compared to the dramatic seizure of power years earlier, but it was devastating nonetheless. He was removed from office, stripped of command, and replaced by General Fred Akufo. Acheampong retreated into the shadows, a former ruler suddenly reduced to a private citizen. Though humiliated, he was still alive, still hopeful that history might soften its judgment of him. But Ghana was moving toward a storm. By 1979, anger had reached a boiling point. Years of economic hardship, corruption, and unfulfilled promises erupted in fury. A group of junior officers, led by a young and fiery flight lieutenant named Jerry John Rawlings, attempted a coup. Though initially arrested, Rawlings became a symbol of popular rage. Soldiers and civilians alike rallied around his message of accountability and justice. The prisons opened, and Rawlings was freed. The Armed Forces Revolutionary Council seized power, declaring that Ghana needed cleansing. What followed was swift and brutal. The new regime announced that past military leaders would be held accountable for corruption and abuse of power. Special tribunals were established, operating with revolutionary zeal rather than measured restraint. The trials were public, dramatic, and emotionally charged. To many Ghanaians, they were cathartic, a chance to see powerful men finally answer for years of suffering. To others, they were deeply unsettling, driven more by vengeance than justice. Acheampong was arrested and dragged back into the national spotlight. Gone was the confident head of state. In his place stood a tired, aging man, visibly shaken by the speed with which his world had collapsed. He was stripped of his rank, his medals, his dignity. Photographs from the period show him subdued, his once commanding posture replaced by a quiet resignation that spoke volumes. During the proceedings, accusations poured in. Corruption, misuse of state funds, betrayal of the people. Acheampong attempted to defend himself, insisting that he had acted in what he believed were Ghana's best interests. He spoke of difficult decisions, of global economic pressures, of intentions that had been misunderstood or sabotaged. But the atmosphere was unforgiving. The revolution demanded blood, and nuance had no place in its logic. Outside the tribunal, emotions ran high. Some citizens celebrated openly, convinced that justice was finally being served. Others watched in silence, uneasy at how quickly the line between justice and revenge had blurred. Families of the accused wept behind closed doors, powerless to intervene. Acheampong's own family endured humiliation, fear, and uncertainty, knowing that the man they loved was being judged not only for his actions, but for the collective pain of a nation. The verdict was swift. Acheampong was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, there was no grand ceremony, no dramatic last stand. The process was stark, efficient, and final. The former head of state was led away, his fate sealed by the same military machinery that had once obeyed his every command. In those final moments, one can only imagine the weight of memory pressing down on him. The rise from obscurity, the years of power, the applause and the criticism, the decisions made in confidence that now stood as accusations. Shots rang out, echoing far beyond the execution ground. With them ended not just a life, but an era. The news spread quickly across Ghana. Reactions were deeply divided. For many, Acheampong's execution symbolized long-awaited accountability. It was proof that no one, no matter how powerful, was above the people's judgment. For others, it marked a dark chapter, a moment when the nation crossed a line, choosing violence over reconciliation. The image of a former leader executed by his own country haunted conversations, newspapers, and private reflections. In the years that followed, Ghana continued to wrestle with the legacy of 1979. Rawlings himself would later transition from revolutionary leader to elected president, reshaping his image and the nation's political landscape. But the memory of Acheampong's fall never fully faded. It lingered as a cautionary tale about power, responsibility, and the fragile bond between leaders and the people they govern. Acheampong's story is not easily reduced to hero or villain. He was a man of his time, shaped by the optimism and turmoil of post-independence Africa. He sought control where chaos reigned, pride where dependency stung, order where disorder threatened. Yet he also presided over corruption, repression, and policies that ultimately failed to deliver lasting prosperity. His execution closed the door on any chance of redemption, leaving historians and citizens alike to debate what justice truly meant in that moment. Today, his name still provokes strong emotions. Some remember the early days of hope, the call for self-reliance, the sense that Ghana could stand on its own. Others remember the hardship, the arrogance of power, the silence imposed on dissent. His life and death serve as a mirror, reflecting both the aspirations and the contradictions of a nation striving to define itself. Ignatius Kutu Acheampong once sat at the pinnacle of Ghana's military government, commanding respect and fear in equal measure. His fall was sudden, his end violent, his legacy unresolved. In his rise and ruin lies a powerful reminder that power, no matter how absolute it appears, is always temporary, and that the judgment of history can be far harsher than the applause of the moment.